The evolution of the obligation of seaworthiness from the Hague Rules to the Rotterdam Rules. Carrier's duty to provide a seaworthy vessel has been one of the most fundamental principles in maritime law and hereby a core element of every contract of carriage of goods by sea throughout maritime history. Notwithstanding, the duty was initially appraised to be absolute obligation under common law, it has been then boiled down to whether exercising due diligence by the carrier as a result of several attempts to find the balance between the commercial interests of carriers and shippers. The obligation of exercising due diligence was introduced in the Charter Act for the first time, though it has, in essence, gained international recognition through the Hague Rules. This paper hereby will comparatively scrutinize how the obligation of seaworthiness has been interpreted by court and whether there is a remarkable difference among the Hague or Hague-Visby rules, the Hamburg rules, and the Rotterdam rules in the sense of the nature of the carrier's duty to provide a seaworthy vessel. Seaworthiness is conceived to be one of the most pivotal concepts in maritime law and hereby has become a core component of every contract in respect of maritime freight transport throughout the history of shipping. The doctrine of seaworthiness had initially been constituted to safeguard the diverse interests of parties exposed to the possible perils of the marine adventure, and then it has been enhanced in response to the current need of marine adventure. The definition of seaworthiness has been subjected to many discussions within time, yet there is still no consensus in this regard. Nevertheless, seaworthiness is generally accepted as a relative and comprehensive term. In hindsight, the standard of seaworthiness had been interpreted in the grip of national laws of different countries. However, after the maritime transport of goods had turned out to be a universal activity, the concept of seaworthiness was required to have been enshrined within international carriage of goods convention in order to unify certain rules and to make sure that the parties to any maritime activity are considerably wary of the severe consequences of breach of the obligation. In essence, the first regulation regarding seaworthiness was introduced by U.S. Charter Act in 1893. Afterward, the principles established in the Charter Act became in many respects the basis of liability and then followed by the Hague Rules, the Hague-Visby Rules, the Hamburg Rules, and the Rotterdam Rules. Consecutively, it must be above all borne in mind that the term of seaworthiness encompasses not only worthiness as regard physical state of the ship, but also voyage worthiness and cargo worthiness. In the light of both International Convention on Maritime Transport of Goods and common law, the aim of this paper is to make a comparative analysis of the obligation of seaworthiness in the scope of the HR or HVR, the Hamburg Rules, and the Rotterdam Rules. Considering this, the evolving character of the obligation of seaworthiness under the involved convention will be scrutinized in the sense of the nature of the carrier's duty to provide a seaworthy vessel, basis of liability, burden of proof, and order of proof. The comparative analysis will also be submitted in the light of the jurisprudence of several state parties to the HR or HVR, in particular common law. The carrier's duty under the Hague or Hague-Visby rules. The genesis of the HR was, in essence, to find the balance between the commercial interests of the carriers and cargo owners, which were regarded disproportionate to cargo interests. This is because the UK, which had dominated over the shipping industry, with a considerable number of sailing vessels and steamship over 100 tons accounting for over a half of the world whole tonnage at the beginning of the 20th century had favored the carriers. In contrast, other countries such as USA, Canada, Australia appear to be favoring cargo owners by enacting accordingly legislation. In the wake of this fragmentation, discussion about a necessity for an international regulation were stirred dramatically. Eventually, the HR were opened for signature in 1924, came into effect in certain states in 1931, and turned out to be the first international mandatory rules constituting uniform international maritime law by enacting to be a general code under bills of lading. Nevertheless, the convention was designed to implement merely to the relation deriving from bills of lading or any similar document of title. That is to say, only certain aspects of the contract of carriage have been encompassed by the HR. Afterward, the HVR, which adopted in 1968, introduced a few subtle changes on the ground that the question raising owing to the shortcoming such as vagueness, insufficient language, obsolescence of the HR became more conspicuous. However, the HVR didn't succeed in fulfilling the real necessities that the new global economy went through even at time of its enactment. The HR or HVR are by far the most significant and leading convention on maritime cargo transport inasmuch as the convention is currently applied through either contractually or statutory and thereby covers 90% of the global shipping tonnage. The striking feature which distinguishes the HR from the other convention lies on the fact that an impressively broad jurisprudence has accumulated over 90 years upon the meaning of the seaworthiness provision in the HR. Nature of the duty under the HR or HVR. The concept of seaworthiness has been defined particularly by providing rather far reaching articles in respect of which element may be necessitated in order for the ship to be considered seaworthy in Article 3.2. Hereby, the carrier is compelled to provide a seaworthy vessel in the sense of that she must be equipped, properly manned with competent and sufficient crew, supplied and ultimately must be within a fit state to retrieve the contractual cargo. In accordance with Article 3.1, the ship owner must exercise due diligence in making the ship seaworthy, which indeed differentiate the convention from common law against the backdrop of the principle of due diligence. From this point of view, an unseaworthy vessel would set the scene for liability of the carrier. To illustrate, any sorts of deficiencies or defect in the structure or equipment of the vessel would render the vessel unseaworthy. A leaky valve caused by missing a vital nut or missing or unfitting spare part, leaking of hatch covers, defective boilers, corrosion of bottom plate. So far as incompetent or insufficient crew or master is concerned, bereft or adequate firefighting training, and indisposition to carry out the job properly, mental or physical incapacity, a shortcoming of knowledge as regard a particular vessel or its system may pave the way for unseaworthiness. A vessel which is not capable to take delivery of cargo and to hand over it safely and accordingly to its final destination would be conceived to be unseaworthy. The residues of previous cargo, improper stowage, or overloading. Consequently, the utmost significance of the concept of due diligence emerged in the event of any deficiency endangering the state of seaworthiness. In other words, even if a vessel was held unseaworthy, the carrier would exculpate himself from the accountability unless caused by lack of due diligence. Definition of due diligence. It is noteworthy to dwell upon what form due diligence as well. Due diligence may be described as genuine, competent, and reasonable effort to the carrier to fulfill the obligation set out in subparagraph A, B, and C of Article 3.1 of the Hague or Hague-Visby rules. Thank you.